Okay, take two. Ladies and gentlemen and variations thereof, welcome to the Selectives Lorecast again. A casual Elder Scrolls podcast. My name is Rotten Deadite. This is take two. Because I'm useless. With me today are...
I'm Andrew, also known as the White Guar.
And I am Felix, also known as Banuhana Masaishi.
I'm Michael, also known as Scourgicus or Moon Sugar Leader.
And I'm Nick, also known as Chris Jr. Apparently.
Yeah, okay. So now that everybody can be seen and heard, today we're talking about Vivec again, because if you watched the last cast, you know that we covered a lot of ground and we still didn't do a very good job. There's still more to talk about, and I might add, we did not really stray that much we didn't ramble that much. We were actually on topic for almost the whole damn thing. So that's.
I would like to point out it's thematically appropriate for us to do 2 episodes.
I was going to say 3 actually.
And it's also appropriate that we have Elder Chris and Younger Chris.
Yeah,
Chris the Mortal and Chris the God.
yeah,
Exactly.
Right
Which one's which? We don't know.
They're both one and the same and yet distinct.
it's an inelegant number.
An elegant number, yeah.
And at the end of the cast, Chris and I will duel to the death.
Yep. I mean, that's just how you do. I mean,
Will
That's
you
the $35
will you take out your spears and compare them?
shit, I don't actually have anything to use for a spear. Damn it.
One moment.
Actually, technically, one of the Chris's fiancés will murder one of the Chris's.
That's
The other Chris.
Mm-hmm. That's the way it ought to work. Or at least give it a shot.
Dribble.
Right.
Oh well.
So
I
because
heard
of
there was
that,
threat
then,
of
should we
murder?
touch on like a
Hey, there you go.
There you go. There you go. He's got a sword.
So where we left off from the last cast, we covered a lot of like the big ticket items for all kinds of swords.
Almost like we're nerds.
We covered all kinds of really diverse stuff about Vivec, but one thing that we didn't hit, which I really want to talk about, is the reason why Vivec exists in Almsevi and why just the general sort of philosophy or metaphysics behind why a joining force is necessary in a trinity. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really happy to have Michael on board today, because we are not going to be able to talk about this without bringing up the Holy Trinity in Christianity.
Happy to be here.
I mean, we could just talk about peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
I will hit you.
What's the binding force in a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Peanut butter and jelly. It binds the bread together. And it's 2 different colors, like Vivec. Vivec is
Like
peanut
the
butter and jelly.
Force?
All right, anyway.
Cast over.
There's that analogy.
So, or if you remember, Michael, before the cast started, you and I were talking about the idea of God and man, or the infinite and the finite, or mortal and immortal, being effectively the 2 parts of oh God, the word flew out of my head. I swear to God, chemistry, an antiomorph. And in this particular case, as we mentioned in the previous billion casts that we've done, the enantiomorph shows up as, if you recall, a trinity of 3 entities: a king, a rebel, and a witness. You're not high enough for this cast? Start now, Doc. Here we go. So, one other. What in the enantiomorph as a plot structure, the way that the witness works is as a third-party observer that watches the interaction of the king and the rebel, and by witnessing the interaction, effectively records it or makes it real, if you want to think about it in terms of mythology or the tale, or telling legends and such. One of the phrases that Kirkbride liked to throw around is that it collapses the waveform, which is a quantum mechanics term for observing a particle. And much like in quantum mechanics, the observer also affects the outcome by observing. So
yes, it's called observer effect. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you are when you're talking about Om Savi, you're starting to approach the idea of creating a god out of three different entities. And this is relevant to the Christian concept of the Holy Trinity, because the Holy Trinity is depending on which version of Christianity you're talking about, arguably a single God that can be discussed or considered as consisting of three different individual entities. Or if you're not there's a term for it, isn't there, Michael?
Trinitarianism.
Trinitarian, thank you. And if you're not a Trinitarian, then it can also be just it can be as harmless as just a way of talking about God, or it can literally be three completely different entities, and there is no fourth larger or encompassing entity.
Yeah. There's a spectrum of ideas, all the way from the Unitarian, which is that there's only one God, and this delves then into like historical heresies, and we'll be here all day if we talk about that.
Oh yeah,
a God who manifests in three ways or is understood three ways, yada 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 yada.
Yeah, and this might seem like splitting hairs, but literally wars have started because of splitting hairs. Yes. So this is something now that I think in the year 2021 that we can talk about this kind of stuff without fear of getting beheaded, but that wasn't always that way. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly, Nick.
Nick's got the sword to do it.
I heard the B word.
Yeah, and are mutually exclusive with many world, which is confirmed in Tordia. I'm gonna want to talk to you about that afterwards, because that's something that's relevant to my interests.
I need to stay after class.
Yeah. No, not in a bad way. And so when you have so in the case of the Holy Trinity, you have and I'm going to start off by explaining this in a very childish sort of way, so that Michael can then tell me how completely wrong I am. Because as anybody knows, the fastest way to learn something is say something wrong on the internet and then wait for somebody to correct you.
We call that Murphy's Law.
Is it?
No,
it's not.
That's
It's not.
He's waiting for somebody to correct. Yeah. But you have three parts to the Holy Trinity. You have Jesus Christ, and you have God, and you have the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit is supposed to, according to some, act as the Vivec in this situation, to bridge the two opposites of mortal Jesus and God and infinite God, so that they can become or can be considered one entity.
Right, that is one of the views. It's the idea of I can't remember what it's called exactly, but that the Holy Spirit is the glue that holds the whole thing together. That is one view.
I was worried that glue might be a little dismissive, so I'm glad you said it.
No, that's I believe it's also a heresy, but yeah, that's one of the.
What's a little heresy amongst this cast?
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
We like it.
It's because of those kind of musings that by the time you get to what is it, Anastasius, is it the Anastasian
something
creed?
I think I remember this.
Not Nicaea. Nicaea is pretty intense, but as you get to the later creeds, they get really, really technical to the point that like you have to have a degree to understand why is that important. Right.
Yeah.
But yes, that is one of the views.
So what I was hoping that you could give us, Michael, was was an explanation of why this is necessary.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Strap in, folks.
All right. I'm trying to decide how deep I want to go here. So,
I know, right? It's actually that's actually a very long explanation.
Why would it be important for the three persons of the Trinity to be one being? Because otherwise, for a variety of reasons, some of which are specific to scriptures that say there's only one God. Some of them, oh boy, a lot of it goes back to the divinity of Christ, which was kind of a controversial idea. That's why there were
Mhm.
4 or 5 church councils about Christology,
Yeah,
something like that.
if I understand correctly, that's literally the discussion of, was Jesus a divine entity?
Yeah. It was, I mean, it gets really crazy. And some of the details are so fine. Like there was the first major, it's not about Christology, but the first major split in the Christian church around 1000 AD. It was between the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholics, what would become the Roman Catholic Church, because they disagreed on the nature of the Holy Spirit. Did it proceed from the Son or from the Father and the Son?
Right.
This is what's called the Filioque controversy. And it was such a bad, it sounds crazy to us, but it was such a severe break that the Roman pontiff abandoned the Eastern Christians to historically Muslim invaders, and
Yeah.
said,
They
"Bye,
let him get
God
killed.
will sort you out. Yeah,
Mhm, yeah.
you can all die. You've been anathematized."
Mhm.
Absolutely crazy. Just that kind of stuff.
Splitters. Right, Baka. and the reason, and it might not seem like that relevant, but the divinity of Jesus is actually like it's pretty critical, because just from a purely just a metaphysical or even philosophical standpoint, whether or not Jesus was a normal human being or not is very relevant, because it says things about what God can and can't do, or is willing to do, or what his purpose is, or all kinds of stuff. It has huge connotations.
There's a actually, they're local to me, called Mercersburg Theology, which is really emphasizes the incarnation as a theological point. The incarnation is that God came to earth as Jesus Christ. That in Jesus Christ is the totality of the Godhead.
Right.
When you look at Jesus, you see the Father. Right. And that is incomprehensibly enormous, because you get in other mythologies, you get like, okay, this is an avatar of the God, but Jesus is God.
Yeah.
And that's just like, that's crazy.
Well,
Nobody,
to sort of ground this for Elder Scrolls fans, it's a little bit like somebody, an NPC or something, or even a player character in an Elder Scrolls game showing up and being proven to be literally the embodiment of Anu.
Yeah.
Like not an avatar of Anu.
Nope, it is
Or
Anu.
subgradient.
Yeah, not a subgradient, not a representative, not inhabited by the spirit of Anu, if you like, or a fragment of Anu or something, but literally all of Anu in one mortal shell.
And and the real trick is
Mike,
that
yeah.
Well, yeah. And that whether you want to talk about it being Jesus or Anu or however, I'm just going to use Jesus, but Jesus as God in the world, that Jesus is subjected to mortality. And even though there is the possibility to call upon divine power, that's not done, to the point that you have this guy who gets betrayed by his friends. He is tortured horribly by the legionnaires and is crucified and killed and dies.
And
God died, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that has massive theological implications as to the fact that God has experienced human life.
Yeah.
And talking about the compassion of God, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and you end up with literally divine metaphysics. Absolutely, Baka. You literally end up with these really hard to answer questions, like, can God, the idea of, can God create a stone so heavy that even God cannot move it? Then you end up, that's actually a really tough question for theologists to think about, because you have to because there are many conceptualizations of what God is like. And one of them is that God is literally infinite, and therefore has no limit to anything.
Right.
So the idea of God being able to voluntarily limit itself is, that's tough, man. It's a tough one. It's not just hard to conceptualize, but it also says very sweeping things about the nature of existence itself. Everybody moved.
Yeah,
what
Andrew
happened?
turned off his camera.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm between the two Chris's. That makes me the observer. No.
Oh, weird. You're on one side for me. Yeah. Thanks, Zoom. So Michael, what we're getting at here is that depending on, again, the particular flavor of Christianity that we're talking about, God is or is not completely incompatible with Jesus or mankind in general.
In God's fullness, yeah, you would.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Prior to the incarnation, well, yeah, we do it well. What's the cool word for them? It's it translates to something like God appearances, and I can never remember what the cool word is for it. They're like God appears in the Old Testament. Chris, we were talking about this. That there's some really fun stories about, God comes down and has dinner with Abram.
Yeah.
Or and
Abraham.
he's like, by the way, I'm gonna nuke Gomorrah, and here's Abram, who's like, could we maybe talk about this for a minute?
Yeah, I was saying, like, Abram has the sheer sack to turn to the infinity of God and go, can we talk about this for a minute? Because I have a compelling argument.
I have a compelling argument. Let's negotiate. So you have those, but yeah, it would be the idea. Here we go. It's that there is an ontological difference, and that God is there is no other in the matrix of creation. God is the other. That everything else is other than God, right? That there's no, in that sense, there can be no similarity, but that changes in the incarnation.
And this is very similar to the relationship that Oblivion has with Aetherius. Where Aetherius contains, in one way of thinking about it, is Aetherius contains the infinite possibility of, the sum entirety of everything.
Right.
Oblivion
Gotcha.
consists of absolutely nothing.
Right.
And so when you think about the relationship between God and mortals, what you're thinking about is, the relationship between Aetherius and Oblivion, if you like, both of them, and Mundus, where it's neither the infinite all or the infinite nothing.
Yeah, it's the realm of possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. So the concept that I'm trying to promote, that I'm trying to steer us towards here, is the idea that an entity, in this particular case the Holy Spirit, has to exist to bridge that unpassable gap between these two extremes.
Okay.
One of the nicknames for Vivek and Almsivi in general is mastery, in the respect of, like, Almalexia is mercy, Sothasil is mystery, and Vivek is mastery, and the alliteration is a big part of the appeal of that. But they also represent roughly equivalent concepts. The reason why Vivek is represented by the word mastery is because that level of mastery is what's required to bridge these two opposites. Okay.
I also thought it might have had something to do with Chem.
I'm getting to that too.
Okay, all right.
And the reason why, and the mastery that Vivek encompasses is the ability to comprehend both of those opposites simultaneously. In other words, the idea of mystery, the unexplainable, and the idea of mercy, which is, unlike mystery, mercy is something that you can comprehend and practice, but mystery is something that you will never be able to comprehend and you will never be able to practice. Okay? And so...
Unless you're so.
Yeah. And so being able to keep both of those disparate ideas in her head at the same time requires mastery. It requires intense, almost impossible levels of skill. And it's not completely unlike the idea of existing in a dream while being simultaneously aware that you're in a dream, which is related to Chim as understanding that you do not exist, that you are an ephemeral fart in the Godhead's brain, but insisting, but instead of zero summing, which is the logical thing to do, you exist anyway. That requires mastery. And so it's Vivek's ability to be a master of this world that allows Vivek to attain the state of Chim. So, Vivek's role as the bridge between the two opposites of Amalexia and Sothasil is literally the same skill or ability or nature that allows Vivek to attain a state of Chim.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I
We
missed,
spent
like,
a
all
little
of
bit of
that.
time, Michael and I, before the cast started, talking about early Judeo metaphysics and the Jewish metaphysics and the idea of excuse me, of the Ark of the Covenant and of
Yes.
the relationship that the Jews have with God as this of the idea of a covenant with an infinite being. And for a lot of, and I mentioned that, you know, for a lot of sci-fi nerds and fantasy nerds, it will sort of sound a little bit like Lovecraftian mythos.
Very much so.
The idea of God being this incomprehensible and terrifying force, and which Abram was arguing with for some reason. Like I said,
Right.
massive balls on this guy.
Yeah, seriously.
It kind of sounds Aristotelian too, like unmoved mover and all that.
Yeah, and yes,
Oh, yeah.
and it's relevant to Gnosticism because Gnosticism or various flavors of Gnosticism suggests that the God of the Jews, the God of the Old Testament, was something called the Demiurge.
Yeah.
Which was, again, depending on the flavor, if you're strawberry or grape, depending on the flavor of Gnosticism, is either an aspect of God or excuse me,
God's
is either an
general
aspect of the Godhead that we are now worshiping in the New Testament that Jesus has turned us on to, or a completely different entity that exists within the oversoul. Of the larger entity. Again, Gnosticism doesn't really have an official, by its very nature, it can't in a way have an official, endorsement, so to speak. So it's whatever you particularly care to agree with.
The interpretation I always saw with that was that the Demiurge was more or less kind of like the general manager, while God was the owner.
It's the difference between a
Yeah.
president and a
this
CEO.
This is why this is fun, because my interpretation from what little I know about the Demiurge is that the Demiurge was sort of the way of explaining why the God of the Old Testament was so vengeful and imperfect and not logical and rational and things like that, whereas the God of the New Testament was. And one of the things that I heard was that the Demiurge was actually an usurper, and that's why the New Testament had to happen to sort of bring back, no, see, that's incorrect. So
Right.
now this is the real God, and that's why it's actually good, and so we can ignore the Old Testament now. There you go.
Yeah.
I solved monotheism. Like,
One of the more interesting Gnostic takes is the idea that God did start off as the Demiurge and as this horrible person, and that through the incarnation is transformed and becomes a good person. And you actually see this in, I can't recommend it orthodoxically, but as a piece of literature, it's a heck of a read. The Infancy Gospel of Thomas, which is not the Gospel of Thomas, that's different. The Infancy Gospel of Thomas has Jesus as a kid walking around killing people.
I've heard of this. Yeah.
It's
Yes.
wild. It is
It's-
a wild
I have-
book.
Jesus
have a
Christ when
copy
the
of the
Doom soundtrack kicks in. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, doesn't Joseph have trouble controlling Jesus because Jesus literally pulls the "You're not my real dad" card?
He basically does, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think in the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus pushes a kid off of a building, which
Yeah.
kills him, and then he brings him back to life. And it's like,
Yes.
what? What's the big deal?
Yeah, that's literally what are you gonna do about it?
He was a pissy teenager.
He really was. There's some
superpowers.
crazy, and it's this idea that even Jesus had to transform, and it's probably depending on the interpreter is emblematic of God becoming a better person.
Right.
So sorry, just to interject real quick, because I have to share this mental thought with everyone of, Jesus, angry, angsty kid, teenager. I just had this visceral image in my head of Jesus listening to "Crawling in My Skin," and then when it's these wounds will not heal, he's looking at his wrists.
Yep.
Stigmata.
Because it would be wrist, yeah.
If there's a hell, I'm definitely burning in it.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah, and
If you haven't had that thought at least once, so you're really discussing theology.
See, I feel like if anyone's gonna make like futuristic anachronisms, like it's gonna be Jesus. like he's gonna show up in Jerusalem with like a 3-piece suit. Be like,
Yeah. I kind of wish that I had learned to read I'd learned to read Greek, because I do sometimes wonder if there aren't things in there that I'm like, wait a minute.
Hey, these are lyrics to a Creed song. What the fuck?
What's going on here?
The Catholic Church is currently training a missile on all of us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if
Pope's
we were
like, just do it.
if we were even remotely
Pull the
important,
trigger.
then maybe. But and so one of the reasons why I think the Demiurge is relevant to Elder Scrolls lore is the idea of or I should say, one of the reasons why the New Testament is or the Old Testament is relative to Elder Scrolls lore is that you still, to this day, I still find conversations where people are trying to figure out why anybody would worship like Malakath, for example, or Mehrunes Dagon or something. And when there are alternatives out there. And we can't really you can't really consider stuff like that without, like, from the standpoint of your own culture. So it's helpful to remember that a lot of people practice religion because that's what their daddy did and they were raised right because of tradition. And
which is why in around the entire world, religion tends to be a study on geography rather than on what's true or what's false.
Yeah, and
there's also this fascinating idea, I think, that we only, one of the struggles of studying Elder Scrolls lore is that we don't really have the lore. Yeah. We have pieces of lore. Mm-hmm. All right, so like I go in the game and I've got my book of Chimer Vimidium, right? And that thing looks like to be about 200 pages long. It's like 5 pages. All right. So what I'm going to assume is that I have a fragment of Chimer Vimidium, right? Mm-hmm. And that the actual book is much longer. So we're getting snippets, so we get an image of what Mehrunes Dagon is like from the things that people say, and for example, Elder Scrolls.
Yeah. And this is a point I bring up all the time, especially in the Tesla subreddit, is as to why the games are not flawless representations of the lore.
Right.
They are a diorama.
Yes.
Just the slivers of all of these little things. If we were somehow living in a real Tamriel, those things would exist, but there would be more.
Yeah, there'd be just tons of it.
Also,
like there's no way the Imperial City would be the size of a reasonably sized mall. Like, it's just
it
doesn't make sense.
Well, fair enough. It's a representation, but one thing that I do want to really stress when it comes to real world religions and why people would worship or do certain things, this has been something that various other humans have wondered about other religions. Christians looked at the Vikings and said, why would you worship this and do these things, these ceremonies, all this blood and stuff? People looked at the Romans and the Greeks and said, what are you guys doing? Well, and again, with imperialism and everything here in the West, you also saw that with indigenous populations in the Americas. Oh, look at them. They're literally wearing animal skins. They're nothing more than savages. And they didn't actually take care to listen to what the actual beliefs were or what the importances were. And this does tie in a bit to what you were saying, Andrew, about geography, because generally speaking, the harsher your climate, the harsher or more strict the rules on certain things are going to be.
Yeah.
That is why Indigenous Canadians have such rigid rules and stories involving cannibalism. It was seen as like the worst thing. Like, that's Wendigo, that's bad spirit, gotta kill you. Like, super bad taboo. It's why a lot of people think like, oh, why is Islam so, repressive? Well, Islam is actually very diverse because it ranges from the tropics of Indonesia to the deserts of Arabia to the temperate rainy forests of the Balkan mountains. Like, it's all over the place, and it is reflected in the cultural and regional geography and histories of people they're in. And so all of this to say that, the idea of, well, oh geez, how and why could people worship Mehrunes Dagon? It's kind of like, he brings about change. And sometimes violent change is necessary to see some kind of progress. Is it ideal? No, and we recognize that, but the change is absolutely necessary. A forest fire is brutal, and it kills people, it kills animals, it destroys arguably the environment, but that is necessary for the cleansing to allow new growth to happen for the benefit and the diversity of the forest, right?
Which I mean, that brings us to the Dunmer House of Troubles. They're adversarial, but they're necessary,
right?
Because they're testing gods. And the Nordic, at least the totemic pantheon, they have a similar kind of thing with Alduin, and I think Orki is in there.
And wrapping all of this together, why you worship all of these gods that seem like, from our perspective, to be pretty big assholes. Let's not forget that the other option is to not worship them and then get punished by them.
Yeah. Your life is going to be unpleasant either way.
Why would anybody worship Zeus? He's a serial rapist with a lightning problem.
Right.
Well, it's because of the lightning.
And also, just to sort of add to that real quick is, we also have to have a consideration for the fact that Tamriel, if we wanted to apply a real world equivalent, would be like finding out not just one god, but many gods are real. Like, hey, remember that time a god literally opened portals into our world and we all had to fight back against him? That was a rough fucking time.
It's just a game of Smite.
Yeah, but you have actual proof. Gods show their favor. They do powers. They give you gifts. They imbue you with divine energy and weaponry. It's like, gods are real. Like, whereas
there's no wagering.
They're more sacred.
It's not a
faith in Tamriel. Faith in Tamriel is probably a very fickle thing. Whereas here in the real world, faith requires, faith. You can't fully see it or understand it, but you still believe in the whatever it is, reincarnation, the divinity of Jesus, God's mercy, all these different things, even without tactile proof. Like, it's not like there's a giant screen above Earth and we're all seeing like this giant face peering down and saying, by the way, I'm fucking real, start worshiping me, you assholes. We don't see that, and so that by its very nature requires faith. Whereas in the Elder Scrolls universe, faith probably isn't really a huge thing. Like, I know they sort of make the connection, but I feel like that's a human imposition to make it relevant to us, the
audience.
Whereas in terms of like the actuality of the world on the ground, you wouldn't need faith because you have literal divine proof.
You have the Babelfish,
right? Yeah, if you you have proof of the existence of God. That's what the Babelfish is. It's proof that God exists, and
which then proves that it doesn't.
Yes, because proof invalidates faith, and God is nothing without faith, and
then God said, "Oh, I hadn't thought about that,"
and disappears in a puff of logic. Yeah.
So
I love those books.
Yeah.
I just wanted to jump back. We were talking about why would you worship. Another thing to keep in mind. One of the really fun things for me about Elder Scrolls Online is when they introduce the justice system, they introduce these like little items that you steal, and quite a few of them are religious items.
Yeah.
And if you've had, as I've been fortunate to have, training in religion as a methodology, you can figure out stuff about the in-game religions based on their religious artifacts.
That's
right.
Yeah,
it's
like reverse archaeology kind of.
It really is. It really is. And part of what draws people to a religion is that every religion poses a problem and a solution. And it may be that they either really feel the problem that is being suggested, the forest needs to be burned down so that new life can grow up, or they really feel the solution. And so you can be drawn into anything based upon how it resonates with you.
Yeah, and I was actually just thinking while you guys were talking about how demonstrable divinity is in the Elder Scrolls universe. It sort of surprises me now when you think about it that people don't migrate from one religion to another very rapidly. And that in order to avoid that, like, worshippers and religions would start coming up with things like metaphysical contracts that you strike with a god, saying, I'll worship you for the next 10 years, or I'm going to, I'm maintaining my membership level, or something like that,
Well, I have something to add, but I don't want to interrupt. I just called next spot to talk.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, it's like, for example, it raises the question of, like, was it the Crimson Dawn? I think the Dagon worshippers in Oblivion. Did I get that right?
Mythic Dawn.
Mythic Dawn. For a cultist in the Mythic Dawn to join the Mythic Dawn under Mankar Camoran, who's saying that Mehrunes Dagon is going to come back and destroy Tamriel, and that you want to get on the ground floor of this shit because it's going to be good, smells a lot like, business owners attracting investors and saying, hey, you really ought to invest your time and energy in my company because I'm about to blow up because I have this amazing product, and you want to get in on this because when it goes big, when we IPO, when the Mehrunes Dagon stock IPOs, you want to be in on the ground floor because then it's going to be all about Wall Street bet stonks, and you're going to miss out on it.
Chicken tendies.
Yeah, you want them chicken tendies, and so
I hate this world.
And so this is welcome to 2021. So this is so for Mehrunes Dagon worshippers specifically in the Mythic Dawn, their first thought is going to be, well, I'm going to be huge when Mehrunes Dagon comes back and does the thing that he does. And so of course they're going to work towards the goal. They're going to join the company of Mehrunes Dagon. They're going to drink the Kool-Aid and make this stuff happen because they're very confident that Mehrunes Dagon is going to come and just absolutely fuck to death everybody that they dislike or that isn't them, and they have quite a lot of evidence supporting that this is going to happen because he's fucking done it before.
Right.
They were like, turn to your history books, page 287.
Yeah,
Behold our God.
Mm-hmm.
So right, but here's the thing to sort of add to that. A thing that is very common and popular with polytheistic religions is people recognize, oh, all these gods are real, they have their place, they serve the purpose, etc. But people will still have their favorites.
Yeah.
So, for example, in India, lots of people like Ganesh because he's the remover of obstacles. So, Ganesh, please, remove these obstacles from my life. So there's a lot of veneration towards him.
Does
For a lot of people seeking enlightenment, they're going to be more about like the divine energies. Like, okay, I want to start praying to Shiva and Parvati and Kali. And if you're looking for like a god that's like a patron of the arts, and if you're a musician or something, Saraswati is going to be up your alley. If you appreciate a lot of the divine beauty in the world, then Lakshmi is your goddess, right? Like, everyone has their favorite. So it's not that they ignore and don't go to temple for the others, and that it's not important that they don't recognize that, oh yes, this is the truth of the universe and these important gods. Yes, you must go to temple, say the prayers 108 times, like, okay. But everyone's going to have their favorites, and this is why there are temples to so many different gods and in different communities, because that's what that community has deemed most important. So this is why in the countryside, sure, there's lots of like temples and pagodas to Shiva. You'll also find ones devoted to more agricultural aspects, but that's part of why Shiva is so popular, because his what are called in Hinduism, there's the idea of divine vehicles. So for example, Ganesh's divine vehicle is the rat, and Shiva's divine vehicle is the Brahmin cow, which is why the cow is seen as quote unquote holy in India. And so there's that connection to one of their supreme gods of the pantheon. And because it is so useful for helping till the fields and, for clearing roads and carrying your product, whether it's food, grain, whatever it is, a load of bricks to market, it's important to venerate them and show respect to their vehicle on this planet, which is the cow, which is why the cows are treated so well. It provides sustenance, right? Like milk and stuff. So that's why in many corners of the country, like in the rural areas, you'll see a lot of shrines to and temples to Shiva because, well, it makes sense. But for other people, Vishnu might be more important for some reason or some ancient connection to a story that involved this village or this city. Different gods of water and of the mountains in places like Srinagar. There's going to be different importances in different ones. And we also kind of see this reflected in the Elder Scrolls, where some pantheons have certain gods and others don't. And there's also an importance placed on some of those within that. So Magnus is super important to the Bretons, but Redguards don't give a shit about Magnus. Right? Like, this is kind of, that's how it works for so many different cultures. Although we should probably start talking about Vivek again.
Well, we're about to, because chat's actually been mentioning, like, hey, are you guys going to talk about Vivek again? Yes, because the question I was going to raise, the reason why I wanted to discuss this idea of, like, polytheistic worship is, why is Vivek the people's god? Why do more people worship Vivek than, say, a protector god like Amalexia, or a god of somewhat abstracted power like a Sothasil, or a god of basketball mastery?
Yeah.
The reason why is because is it because Z's cooler? It's actually because it's partially it. It's partially because Vivek spends more time walking about with the people and being in touch with mortals in general, but it's also because of Vivek's nature as the mastery between mercy and mystery. It's because Vivek without eliminating the need for the two opposites also encompasses them. You can think about worshiping Vivek as a little bit like, if you are if you need the like, if you're a Dunmer, you're used to thinking about gods in terms of, what are you going to do for me anyway? Right. So the way to think about Om-Sivi in this respect is that Vivek is the channel through which you can most directly communicate with the whole of Om-Sivi. If you go and talk to Sothasil, you're only going to get 1/3. If you go and talk to Amalexia, you're only going to get 1/3, and you're going to get all of that. You're going to get 100% of Amalexia. You're going to get 100% of the warrior aspect. You're not going to get any of the wizard, and you're not going to get any of the thief. And so I think that Vivek, for the tribunal worshipping Dunmer, was a little bit like the default, the fallback god. When you get up in the morning and you don't have any particular goal that day that's relevant to anything in particular, and you just want to praise Om-Sivi, you're going to pray to Vivek.
So, I have something to add here. The parallels don't entirely work, but one could sort of make a case for Sothasil, Amalexia, and Vivek also sort of having parallels with the Hindu Trimurti of, I think it's Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu.
Vishnu, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So basically, Brahma is the creator god who created everything and is sort of responsible for the Vedas and knowledge, and I guess you could say mystery and stuff like that. So you could sort of make a case that Sothasil equals Brahma.
A little bit.
Vishnu,
yeah.
The destroyer, Amalexia, I will shower the world with my mercy, but she's also got the cool warrior face thing. I
Yeah,
know Vivek's the warrior
snake-faced.
poet, so I know it doesn't fully work out, but like still, you know, the central pinnacle leader. We often think of Shiva as like the supreme deity of Hinduism in general, right? Like he's usually pretty up there. And Vishnu is the preserver, which means you're sort of everyday existence. Welcome to another day. How you doing? How's your mother? Have you eaten yet? The world that
The look is so thin.
continues is under the guise of the preserver Vishnu, which is also why Vishnu gets like 9 avatars.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, and like basically the way there's different denominations of Christianity, there are also denominations of Hinduism. You have Shaivism, I think, which is the main, that's like Shiva's the big guy. And then you have Shaktism, which is that Shakti, which is like that sort of divine energy thing that I was telling you people before related to Parvati, is like the supreme being. And then you have Vaishnavism or something, or Vaishnavism, something like that, which is the one that holds that Vishnu is the supreme guy. He's the head of the Trimurti, kind of people's god, all the avatars, because he loves and cares for the people of humanity and the world as it is. And in terms of those various denominations of Hinduism, the one that treats Vishnu as the supreme guy, you know, the chief king of the pantheon, that is the most popular denomination. Like 67% of people who identify as Hindu subscribe to this denomination of Hinduism. And so why is Vivek the people's god? Because he has done, or Z has done, a lot of things for the people of Morrowind, as we've seen. So even though Almalaxia is arguably like officially the protector and mother to the nation, Vivek is the one who's kind of going out there and doing all these things and making more of the story and the universe about herself, which then results in, you know, all this amassed popularity and quote unquote goodwill. We know all the stories about Vivek, right? Like, I stopped Bardao, I fought City Face, I turned myself into this titan and walked through the cities in celebration. I made a provisional house, and I made
summoned
women
mating
of
demons.
ancient Redguard kings. Like,
and the connections to Hinduism continue with Vivek taking the place of I believe Gwar and plowing the field for a farmer.
Oh, that's right.
That story.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Although again, that brings me back to how like there's also a lot of connections between Vivek and Shiva.
Yep.
Like, you know, like the hair from which all waters of knowledge flow forth, and like there's a lot there.
So Chris, I've got something good for you to piggyback on what Felix is saying. So in Christian theology, we refer to the Trinity in very similar terms: creator, redeemer, sustainer. And the sustainer is the Holy Spirit, which is you were drawing connection between the Holy Spirit and Vivek. So yeah.
And somebody in chat also pointed out that Almalexia is huge in the mainland, which is true. I have a friend of mine who lives in the mainland, and he has all her albums. And I won't shut up about
city
it.
Is, yeah.
And well, yeah, it is also, it's where Mournhold is, but also she's huge in the mainland because the mainland borders on the territories of the Dunmer traditional enemies, who aren't, you know, themselves or the Dwemer. So
and the mainland
it
is
would
mostly out of the blast radius for Bardao.
That's true.
Fair point.
Yeah.
We don't have to necessarily worship the
wait, guys,
finger on the button quite as much.
Okay, so I just realized apparently Morrowind just keeps getting hit with impact. Like, hey, look, Varden fell, which is where the heart fell, because the heart literally collapsed and causes giant volcano, and then. You know, Vivek just basically sat there and said, "And I'll do it again with Bardao."
Yeah. Test me, motherfucker.
What's that goofy meme?
Love me or else.
Yeah.
I'll fucking do it again.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. And that's so I got a note here for us to get ready with me here, Michael. Let's discuss Vivek's golden path.
Okay.
So This is not an official, like, there's not really an equivalency. This isn't something that's directly mentioned in Elder Scrolls lore, but it is alluded to in the 36 lessons, the idea of Vivek having a... Oh, did somebody bingo? Baka?
Bingo.
Hey.
I knew I'd bring up Dune and somebody would get it.
Oh, let's see it.
And so there's the Golden Path is Dune. There's an allusion in the 36 lessons, or not allusion, a reference, or some similar language to Vivek basically suggesting that Z has a plan for the Dunmer, and that there's an incoming threat, and etc. And it is expanded upon in the love letter from the Fifth Era.
Right.
And it smells to Dune fans a lot like Leto II's Golden Path, which was similar in the respect that it was an anticipation of a horrible catastrophe that the prophet of which is not very forthcoming about.
Yep.
And the way of protecting yourself from this horrible event is to make yourself into a massive badass by experiencing horrible, horrible things. And Duke Leto II's Golden Path is, I think, objectively way bleaker than anything Vivek has in mind. Because Leto II slaughtered, I don't even think they put a number on it, but certainly trillions of humans.
Yes.
Whole planets, and caused the entire galaxy of the setting to fragment heavily.
Essentially collapsing.
Yeah, purposefully collapsing the economy and the trade routes and everything, and establishing
travel, basically.
Yeah, and establishing himself, Leto II, as this obscene dictator in a universe that's already fucking difficult as it is.
And for 3,500 years.
Yeah, for a really, really long time. And Vivek seems to kind of echo that idea of occasionally, in Vivek's case, not as often cruel dictator who literally holds a rock, a giant meteor over her people, and says, "How much do you love me?" Did you guys send me presents on my birthday?
What's my favorite color?
Yeah, come on, I've got two.
Blue. No, green.
Blue, no, yellow.
Well, to sort of drop like my own little self-reference, I kind of touched on that when I was writing Aria, the Redguard coda.
Mm-hmm.
There's a part in there that I'm relatively proud of because it comes across as fairly Vivekian, where I have the main character receive a letter from Vivek that says, "Oh, hey, I'm surprised you could pull this off. I am only allowing you to do this just because I'm impressed you actually could manage to do it. I could steal it back from you if I wanted to, but I won't because I'm just very busy. You know how it is." And it's like,
yeah.
Okay.
Penciling you into my schedule would be a nightmare.
Yeah, that's it. Yes.
Basically, because there's a lot of stuff going on still, like before and after Landfall, which is the setting of that story, right? So there's definitely something that's going on, and it's also interesting of note to sort of bring this to the real world. There's lots of religions that have some form of finality to existence, oddly enough. Like, okay, in Christianity and the various other Abrahamic faiths, you have literal Armageddon, the end of the world, sound the trumpets, here come the four horsemen, the righteous are saved, it's the final battle. The Vikings, we're going to fight in Valhalla and we're gonna die. The cool thing about the Viking one is that apparently there will be two people, a man and a woman, who hide in a tree, who will escape all of the destruction to follow, and they will rebirth humanity anew. Yeah, which I thought was like, okay, that's cool. I see a Viking religion. I respect that.
What you
In
don't know is
Hinduism,
that
it's again the thing that like at the very end of everything, Vishnu is going to come back in his final avatar to lead humanity and all good Hindus in the final fight against evil. Like
I am
we
become
humans
death
seem to
forever.
love to have,
Mhm.
even if we see a cyclical nature to it, we still like to have this idea of, you know, the final full stop, like, and that's how our story ends. And
Yeah,
a great
closure.
big closure,
A
like this
denouement.
great big battle that we're all going to be a part of, and it's going to be righteous and glorious, and and I'm just imagining like aliens out there just coming across so many stories like this, and they think, "Aw, it's cute, you're adorable, pat pat."
Hmm.
now the trick with the Viking story is that it doesn't end with the quote unquote Adam and Eve figure and a happy ending, because at the very end a dragon comes with corpses hanging from its wings. So the Viking idea is that it really is a cycle.
Hmm. It's and the horrible violence began again. Yeah,
That's it. It's it
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
and
And
Hmm?
well, speaking of all of this, and just kind of the thought that's been bouncing around in my hollow skull for the last few minutes is if Vivek has a golden plan and all coincidence has been vanished in Vardenfell, and we know there's some crap coming, how much of the events of Morrowind with the Tribunal losing their connection to the Heart of Lorkhan and the collapse of Bardau and everything else, how much of that is intentional and to what end?
hmm
Isn't there?
I'm glad you asked.
Can I interject for just a second and then
Sure.
Felix say his thing? Isn't there? I don't remember if it's something somebody else wrote or something, but Vivek says, "What I do for love."
hmm
Capital L.
hmm
I always, and I may be conflating two different things, but I always saw that as a reasoning for why he allowed Bardal to fall in the first place, because it allows it puts the Dunmer in such a volatile and dangerous position that it allows them to gain the strength to eventually overcome landfall.
Yes.
I
Right.
fucking hate you because that's what I was going to say.
Oh, okay.
You fucking dick.
Well, this is
Like I was going to say that, like, I'm going to put on my brass foil Dwemer hat and say that the conspiracy is that Vivek engineered the Red Year to prepare his people for the suffering that they would need in order to abandon their land for the final time, to go live on the corpse of the dead god's asshole in the sky.
Yeah,
And like
because
that's
if
how
the-
you know, oh, this is how I'm preparing people so that they can live on these moons and fight Numidium. Like I was going to say that. You
Yeah, if Morrowind had still been inhabitable, then when landfall happened, the Dunmer might have been tempted to try to hole up in their holds in Morrowind and, like, you know, batten down the hatches and so on.
Yeah.
What Vivek knew was necessary was for everybody to leave Tamriel, period. You have to get off of Nirn. That's what Vivek wanted people to do, and so
kind of a Thanos or
a little bit
Ozymandias kind of thing.
Ozymandias, yes.
I'm going to create a giant cataclysmic event that's going to later save you.
Yeah, well, again,
Because
this is
it happened.
Leto II's golden path.
By the way, that's exactly what Frandar Hunding did for the Red Guards.
Yeah. And this, we cannot remain a single planet species. That's right. And so when, you know, what I would have liked to have seen at some point would have been Vivek planting the seeds of a Dunmer space program.
Well, he brought a bunch of Khajiit in, so problem solved.
wait, hang
Fair
on.
point. Fair
no,
point.
Okay. No, I got an idea.
Get to climbing, boys.
Here's the
We're outta
Dunmer
here.
space program. You put a giant blasting cap over Red Mountain, it builds up the pressure, and then it yeets you into the sky.
So
You know,
So
that would
basically,
actually,
the way they killed
Actually-
cars is that what you're saying? Vivek flew into the stars. Eventually, Vivek stopped thinking. Yeah.
There's your JoJo reference.
Have you all seen the picture of the Wonder Weir? The ship that
don't-
they take to Masser?
I don't
No.
think
No.
Is there a picture?
There is a
Yeah.
picture. It
Link-
exists.
link me.
Oh,
Oh God, I don't even know where I have it anymore.
Oh, man,
and I
find
would
me that.
propose,
Yeah.
I would propose, while Michael is finding this, that the Dunmer Space Program is just the Telvanni wizards not putting
Is
stairs in
it-
their houses.
Wait, okay. As
Well, I mean, you say that, but it's entirely possible that the Dunmer Space Program was literally the Telvanni just floating something up to Masser. I
That's
mean,
exactly what it is.
That's a fucking URL right there.
Oh,
whoa,
Jesus.
that didn't come out
God.
right. Data
Copy
image,
image.
no. Would you drag and drop something? That didn't work.
Yeah, no, okay. I'm damn it.
But
It takes
Felix,
me to
you're not
some-
far off.
Some kind of RP Nation.
what do you mean I'm not far
It's
off?
got
Ooh, no.
what looks like a Spelljammer ship.
Mhm. Oh, really?
Hang
Well,
on.
here I can probably. Oh, I can't share my screen.
But
What? Why not?
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, they changed something again. Thanks, Zoom. All right.
Damn it.
Or maybe I can just.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
like-
Yes.
Okay,
that
yeah,
kind of
that's what I was
works.
saying.
All right.
Is that the image, Michael?
Hang on.
that looks like the weather light from Magic the Gathering. If
Give me
I'm
a
going
second,
to be
let me
if I'm going to
jump
be
back.
even more of a nerd.
No, that's not it.
No?
That's not it.
Okay, because that's the first thing that came up when I looked up Wonderweir. Here's a
Anyway, here's
guy
Wonderwear.
who's- Here's a guy on Twitter whose name is John Weir and his username is Wonderweir.
I'm not going to be able to find it. I
Okay,
want to
can
say
you tell
that
me
it,
where you saw it?
I
was
got
that-
it. I got it from somebody who knows MK. And I
Mojo?
don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want to.
Their Fox, maybe?
I don't want to get them into trouble, but they shared it with me and they weren't supposed to. But okay, what the
Oh.
heck? I'll say it. It's all of the towers slammed together into one giant thing, and it's all sitting on Red Mountain.
Oh, for God's sake. All right.
That's fucking
This
That is awesome.
It is awesome. It's complete. All of the towers have been taken and slammed onto Red Mountain, and that's the Wonderweir that they used,
Including
to
the
get
Throat of the World.
off. Apparently, yes.
So it's just two mountains smashed
It's-
together with a bunch of sticks on it.
No, with White Gold Tower, with the Ur Tower,
With
I assume
adamantine,
all
yeah.
the Nestes on there. Yeah, it's.
I kind of
I,
imagine.
I took a mountain and I put it in another mountain. Yo, dog, we heard you like mountain.
It's great.
It just looks like two mountains getting acupuncture.
Let me
Well,
see if
well,
I
no.
can find it on my hard drive.
I'm kind of imagining like so we have the two mountains kind of side by side, like they're broken off at the tip, like when you break the tip of your pencil, kind of like that, and then you got the towers forming some kind of ship shape,
Mm-hmm.
The struts between the two.
like between the two, so it looks like a penis.
But yeah, I was about to say it's two mountains like this, and then like a long kind of,
Felix's reaction made that totally worth it.
yeah,
We have fun here.
we have fun here.
I mean,
Uh,
I've
And this is a
accidentally-
cast about Vivek.
So,
Nice, so we're on
It
track.
does make sense. Yeah.
no,
so why does Vivek have to shave her head?
to make room for the
fire.
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 What is that?
Fire. Okay, no. this.
Well, it's that too.
Silence, Junior Chris. So
Liquid.
here's the thing. Fire is often seen as a point of illumination and
Mhm.
attributed to knowledge in various cultures. There's elements of this with the Vikings. You see this a lot with indigenous peoples throughout the Americas, and I think even in Australia.
Plato's Allegory of the King.
And in early depictions of like early Muslim art by the Persians, you see that instead of a traditional like halo as we associate with Jesus and Catholic imagery in the West, you see that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his head is wreathed in fire. And this is also partially an allegory, I think, or I suspect, don't quote me on this, that it partially has to do related to similar imagery involving fire in the Old Testament, particularly the burning bush.
Okay.
Michael, are you in agreement?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
And that's also where you get the tongues of fire on the apostles in Acts 2. Yeah.
So
It's a symbol of the spirit or divinity coming upon.
this is related to the the direction I was going to steer us in, which is the idea of the halo.
Which I mean, that can also be traced back to like the Egyptian sun discs too.
Okay.
Yeah, and also like Greek and Roman sun gods like Apollo.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I mean, if you look at like Ra, sun disc over his head, I mean, all you got to do is take that disc and go whoop, and hey, it's a halo.
Right. And
I mean, if you look at like stained glass imagery of, like Mary and Jesus, like the Madonna and child, then she'll have a halo that looks like a sun disk, but it's been put behind her head instead of, stuff like that. So I mean, there's a very clear relationship there.
So have we?
I'm doing D&D too.
Well, have we covered where the idea of the halo comes from?
In like real life or in Tamriel?
In real life.
I mean,
I don't know if there is. Is there a halo in Tamriel?
I mean,
some of the gods have halo-like imagery.
Right, but where does that imagery come from in real life?
I mean, multiple places, I would imagine. I mean, it's such an iconic, very, very universal symbol that, because you have, Egyptian and Sumerian sun discs, you've got the Judeo-Christian halo, you've got, trying to think what else. I mean, headdresses in various forms in various cultures, can do that.
Well, the original, the first depictions of halos in Christian mythology happened after the development of a practice called Theoria, which is a type of meditation or prayer that involves staring... Lord Dog, that involves staring at images of, depictions of divinity of some kind, of Jesus or Mary or whatever. And,
Sorry,
and Theoria is a type of prayer that is done over great lengths of time. It's not something you just sit down and do for an hour. It's something you do for days and weeks.
I don't know. I was thinking it originated on November 15th, 2001, when Halo Combat Evolved came out.
Okay, there it is. So I was waiting for that.
Sorry, I had to.
And just checking off my own personal checklist of memes. And people who practiced Theoria reported being able to see the divine fire of Jesus forming around sculptures or pictures of Jesus.
Yeah. Interesting.
And it's very hard to ignore that similar things were reported by Hindu practitioners or Buddhist practitioners when staring at, when meditating and looking at depictions of various gods. They also reported being able to see the same thing, or a similar effect, essentially. And in Hinduism, there's a lot of discussion of the idea of like the fire that burns away all desire and that kind of stuff, which is very Thelema related.
Being able to see people's auras and chakras and things like that. It's usually got this sort of flame like aspect about it. For all the weebs in the chat, you see this in Naruto, the anime.
And also Dragon Ball.
And I was about to say, same thing in Dragon Ball. Yeah.
I was trying to keep it for the younger kids, not the old bastards like us.
Yeah. I don't know. Is Naruto old school yet? Seems like
in Akira too.
Yeah, in Akira. Well, also in a lot of kung fu movies, you'll see people like glowing with chi and etc. And so the idea of this sort of holy flame surrounding a face or a head, or in some cases in a person's entire body, appears to be what Vivek's fire is referencing, the idea of a fire that burns away desire. That Vivec shaves her head to make room for the fire just makes sense. I mean, it's absolutely related to the Buddhist and Hindu concept of the internal flame.
I wish ESO had given
Yeah, me too.
the fire. I mean, there was kind of that. I think there was a reference when at the very end you give the stuff to all the people who helped you,
Mhm.
and every time you do, there's a little boom, like sparks fly up from Vec's head. I think that's the closest.
I honestly strongly suspect they just couldn't get an effect that they were happy with.
Probably.
Yeah,
Lord
because when you think about it,
Papa
that ESO doesn't really have a particle effect that would really do the job. You know, not in the way that it's depicted in fan art.
No,
certainly,
all they really have to do is take the flame, asset from, like when you pull out a flame staff with a flame enchantment, there's just stick
yeah,
them
but
on
that's a very simple particle effect. It's more sparks than that kind of stuff. I think what they wanted was like I'm getting distracted, but there's actually an NPC in the new World of Warcraft expansion that has a very convincing flame around its head. That's actually it actually looks like they cell animated a particle effect. It's actually very good. So that the reason why Vivek gains this during the 36 lessons, and this might be sufficient to segue us into the 36 lessons, is because the 36 lessons depict Vivek's evolution as a god. And the burning away of all desire is one of the metaphysical requirements for attaining true godhood. Gods do not desire anything, they just act on their will. They act on divine inspiration, so to speak. Desire is something that humans have. It's not something that that immortal beings have to deal with. And so Vivek summoning the fire and burning away her desires is part of the inevitable, is part of the requirements of moving on to godhood. And what I would recommend people do is read 36 lessons again and keep in mind in the back of your head while you're reading them that Vivek has not truly attained the godhood that he wants, and that the evolution of Vivek during the 36 lessons is Vivek striving to reach that godhood through completing various tasks, including developing the fire and submitting to Morlag Baal, and eventually annihilating the parts or transforming the parts of herself, the flaws of herself that become her children. And marrying herself to the Dunmer people, to Resdain and Omsivi in general. And then at the end of the 36 lessons, ask yourself if Vivek succeeded or not. And Sothasil states that Vivek is not happy with herself. And at the end of the 36 lessons, ask yourself whether or not Vivek has achieved the level of godhood that he wants. And I would argue that he doesn't.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm with you.
Yeah. Because it's one of the arguments that Jabal Unsul makes in Coda when he's arguing with Numidium, is that Numidium has not gotten comfortable with the idea that it's not the main character of the story. That it's not the hero, that it's not going to get what it wants. And
So continue that. I call the next question.
Okay. So the puzzle that Numidium has failed to solve is how to exist with the certainty or with the acceptance that you're not going to get what you want, and that you're not going to get to be the main character. You're not, the entire world does not revolve around you, which is a really tough nut to crack for a lot of people. For everybody that you meet on a daily basis, it's very hard to accept the idea that your story as a human being in this world is not going to end with this great bow tied up at the top, this great denouement where you get all your rewards that you've worked so hard to get. It's a very tough it's very difficult for people to deal with the certainty that sometimes life just whores you. and you just get stiffed. You just do. And that sometimes you can do everything right and still fail. And it is a tough lesson to learn, and it's not something that Numidium or the Dwemer learned at all. And it's something that they actively fought against. They fought against the idea that they weren't the main characters, that they weren't going to get what they wanted. They fought against that so hard that they, as Jubal and Sewell kind of in a roundabout way says, just threw a goddamn temper tantrum like a bunch of children and packed up their balls and went home.
I just realized, and this is totally not a serious note, that the song All Star by Smash Mouth can be read from the perspective of Vivek.
Yeah.
So what would Vivek's goal have been if she had attained the level of godhood that she wanted?
What Vivek wanted was to be the mother of reality. Vivek wanted to be the Amaranth,
Right.
I think.
Yes.
It's why
That's
Z
clear.
built the provisional house.
Yeah.
Well, I have we talked a whole lot about duality with Vivek? I don't know
No.
if that was something we covered last time, because I know that we kind of touched on it like in the Discord when we were talking about what we want to bring up.
Well, then touch the demon inside me. Come on, touch it.
Okay.
Touch on it.
So I mean, we know, I mean, that the dualism present in Vec is pretty obvious. I mean, even just in
No.
physical representation.
Written on her skin.
What? I didn't know that.
I mean, even Muwatra being representative of both genitals,
Organs, yeah. Mhm.
yeah, you know, that's dualistic. But then getting into her personality, Z wants to be everything but can't be everything. That in and of itself is a duality. The more of everything Z becomes, the less satisfied Z is.
Yes.
And so that it's like Vivek is a walking contradiction of you know, constantly trying to be two things at once, mortal and God. Blue
That's
and
why
yellow.
Vivek is mastery.
Yeah.
Because
And
for the
so
most
it's,
part, Vivek has mastered that ability. For the most part.
lies and truth. I mean, there are so many different ways we can look at Vivek in duality, and
Peanut butter and jelly.
Well, I would peanut butter and jelly. I would say that, Jesus.
with a baseball bat. Yeah.
I would say that I would suggest that Vivek has mastered all the parts of mastery, all the parts of duality that Vivek is fated to master. Because by Vivek's own admission, there is no coincidence. That means that everything is planned and everything is fated to happen, and that everybody has their piece in the puzzle.
Which is
Right.
corroborated by Sotha Sil when
Right.
he talks about, you know, the fatalistic nature of the universe, that you know, because we know Sotha Sil can, you know, he can do the math and say, oh well, this is what's going to happen next. It's just gonna happen.
This is the same math that the Thalmor do, by the way, which is also important to remember.
And the same math that I would say made Jiggalag go crazy and turn into Sheogorath.
Oh no, that's an interesting idea.
Oh yeah, I mean that's kind of what's alluded to.
So is there really just one like determinism calculator and it's just being passed around?
Well, I mean, there's one. The Elder Scrolls universe is interesting in the respect that there is one pattern. There's one random seed, and you can, provided you spend enough time researching the math has been calculated by the same mind. And so and in the process of attaining Chim, once you realize that state of what the mind is thinking and the way the mind thinks, you can make the calculations. It's not hard. It's the same simple ass math that tells you that you don't exist. It's 1 + -1. It's very, very basic shit. And dualism and Hinduism. Okay, great. Paste that into chat if you have a chat window open, Felix, in the channel Twitch.
I got it open on my other.
I got it. Already done.
Okay.
Fantastic. So it's this. So Vivek's experience, calculation has led her to the same conclusion that the Thalmor have, and the same conclusion that Sothasil has led to. But their approaches are very, very different. Vivek's is we're just gonna fuck out of this place altogether. We're just gonna quit. You know.
Well, and a thought I just had.
Well, not quit. We're gonna mutate it, I guess. I don't know.
thought
We're
I
gonna make
just
our
had
own
is-
game.
Do you think Vivek
blackjack.
wants to be the player character too?
Okay. All right. See, now you're getting me into the metagaming kind of stuff.
I say player character. I mean, that's pretty much video game terminology, but in lore terms, I guess prisoner would be what we want to say. I mean,
yeah.
Because I think it would be if someone were to make a game and Vivek were a playable character,
Mhm.
I think that would break that concept because Vivek can't be that. That's one of the things that Vivek can never do
Mhm.
is become a prisoner, no matter how much Z wants to.
Not in the same respect that not in the sort of gamey-wamey respect that a player is.
No, I mean, what I'm saying is, I mean, we can only see Vivek as a separate entity from ourselves.
Mhm.
We can never see Vivek through a first person perspective as Vivek because that wouldn't make sense.
Right.
Because as a character who is locked into this deterministic, forever an NPC kind of thing, to use some phrasing,
Mhm.
To play as Vivek would be breaking that role that Z has in
Right.
the arts overall.
And
Are we certain that that is the case?
no.
No. Welcome to the Selectives Lorecast.
Yeah.
Casual Elder Scrolls Lorecast.
Yeah.
Everything's made up and
Yeah, the rules don't matter.
nothing
Yeah.
Because
Well said.
the thought that's been that I've been mulling
Exactly.
over is the instant that Vivek vanished coincidence in Vardenfeld is the most important moment in this Kalpa.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And
Well, it was certainly a requirement for Vivek's entire philosophy. The whole argument that Vivek has from the root.
And for Coda and the consequences thereof.
Mhm.
So I wonder if you could make the argument that in that specific moment, and only in that moment, Vivek was as powerful as you wanted to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I then start talking, Michael.
Yeah, bring on the heresy.
I
Yeah.
didn't want to be rude.
No, get in.
Heresy.
Okay. I have a lot of heresy when it comes to Vivek, and if you all have hung out on the Facebook groups, you know that I'm very critical of Civi and of Vivek in particular, and I try to be very careful about that. I try to be respectful about that because this is
we don't have to like a character as a person to understand and enjoy that character.
I agree, and I love Vivek. Vivek,
yeah.
in my mind, is one of the most well-drawn, well-written characters and most tragic characters in all of fantasy literature.
Absolutely.
And
Agreed.
I mean that. I mean that.
Yeah.
Z
I mean,
is amazing.
I think Almalexia is a little more tragic, like in a
Maybe.
literary sense.
In one direction, yeah, I can see how you would think that.
Yes,
yeah.
but heresy.
Yes.
Okay, so my principal approach to Elder Scrolls lore is through a sociological system called mimetic theory, and this is a real-world system by Rene Girard, who is he was a literary guy, but also a sociologist. And I'm not going to go into all that. We'll be here for 6 hours, and it's already been too long. But the long and short of it is it's a way of looking at duality and conflict. And the philosophy that Vivek and most most people on Nirn, or at least in Tamriel, have adopted is that the nature of the universe is one of conflict, specifically stasis and change, but it goes much deeper than that. And you see this in the highest gradients with Anu and Padme, right? They're each another's other, and that language is extremely important, because there can be no confluence, there can be no interaction, there can only be opposition, right? And so that's why the mundus is important, because it's a realm of possibility, and it's a possibility of changing the duality of the universe. So the problem with Vivek's duality is that Vivek sees no third way, that Vivek has bought into the mimetic violence of the Arbus, which is only one of us can be right. Oh boy, how do I put this into brief statements? Oh God.
Mhm.
Okay,
do
let's go back to my boy Numidium. You guys know I got a soft spot for Numidium.
Oh yes.
If Numidium is an angry child who is throwing a tantrum, it's because that's what Almcivi turned Numidium into.
Mhm.
Numidium, and man, we don't talk about this nearly enough, is that Numidium is made in the image of Vivek by Kagranak.
According
That's,
to yeah.
that's
According
in
to
the
Vivek.
36 according to Vivek. Now, and you'll notice that Numidium gets stomped on pretty hard by Almcivi.
According to Vivek.
According to Vivek. And the thing that Vivek takes from Numidium is its feet. And I've talked before about in Judaism, feet can be a euphemism for sex organs.
Yeah.
And metaphysically, mythologically speaking, sex organs is the possibility of change, progression, transformation through children, etc., etc. And so what's robbed of Numidium is the chance to become anything other than what they made it.
Mhm.
So who's the real villain here?
Oh,
Anyway.
It's Elder Scrolls. Everybody.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Todd
It's
Howard.
yeah.
Well, probably, but I'm kind of rambling because I have too much to say, and I don't.
I know
how do I
exactly
say
how
it
you
all?
feel. Yeah.
Oh God,
had
Both of
longer,
these
I would've
casts
written
have
a
been me
shorter
just
letter.
hoping like hell I can get all my thoughts out.
and I don't know how to do it, but it's
Yep.
okay. So dualism. It's that Vivek believes there can only be either or. There can only be one way.
Mhm.
And in that, there's only one way, and it's the way that ends up with everybody dying, and that's why Vivek wants to escape and create the path of escape, but it isn't, because Numidium follows them. As I've been saying for years, you cannot escape memory. The
Mhm.
past goes with you wherever you go. You can hide in the sun and try to dream a new dream. You can go and hide on the moons and pretend that all of that didn't happen, but it's always right there with you.
Yeah, Michael, you've read a Redguard Coda. You know what I suggest and infer.
Absolutely.
Well, I wonder, in the confines of your interpretation and heresies there, Michael, is Vivek aware of the fact that Z is only seeing things in a black and white one or the other path? Because I mean, in was it Sermon 11, I think Z talks about the folly of I guess dualism. Hortator and Sharmat,
Yep.
1 and 1.
Cloven duality with a hammer.
Yeah, I mean, is Z being critical of herself
Probably.
in that? Because that's
the whole thing with the hammer. That's a reference to Nietzsche and Twilight of the Gods, where he does philosophy by a hammer.
Mhm.
Yeah.
My interpretation of that line was that it was specific to a particular duality.
okay. Specifically Sharmat and Hortator, or
Don't remember. I'm
I
actually
think-
backing
I
up to
think
try
that-
and recall.
because I think that's the context of that conversation.
So one of the reasons why I shared that article about dualism in Hinduism is how they make several distinctions about what that can mean in Hinduism in terms of like the physical and the metaphysical, or like it's not just a good versus evil thing, it's about sort of concrete and non-concrete ideas. which could then apply to the Elder Scrolls and Vivek's statement that I am both dreaming and awake. That's an example of dualism in terms of the mundrial and the metaphysical.
Mhm.
So there's different ways of thinking about dualism beyond the
Yes.
one and other in terms of a strictly physical thing, or good and evil as concepts.
So
There's a bit more to that, and that's mainly the reason why I shared it. The article's nice and short, just kind of gives you an idea of, this is what it could mean. Like, that's basically it.
there is an idea brought up by Goethe, which is "Du musst ambos oder Hammer sein." You must be hammer or anvil.
Mhm.
And Vivek is the hammer. He's the agent of change. But the dualistic reality is the anvil. The anvil almost always breaks the hammer.
Right.
I like that. That's a powerful imagery there.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
And
I like
and it
You
definitely
can struggle all
plays
you
to the-
want. You can you can change what you're forging as much as you want. The anvil will win.
Yeah, because the hammer always shatters the anvil always shatters a hammer.
Yes.
and that's
Reality is unbreakable,
and that I think speaks
except
to
when it
the-
isn't. Thank you, Red Guards.
and I think that speaks to the tragedy of Vivek, is that you guys had mentioned, and man, I wish I'd been here talking about that. Muatra is an anagram for trauma. That Vivek's life is horrifically traumatic, and that trauma is a part of what plays out in her golden path, so that there is a degree of self-sabotage.
I think also just one of the vibes I got, I could be way off base with this, but to touch on some of what Michael's saying and Vivek, in Coda, I always got the feeling that Vivek as bride was kind of surrendering herself to the idea of it because they couldn't fully understand it, and so it's kind of like, I gotta embark on this path with someone who actually gets it. This is how I
Right.
can make that transformation that I couldn't do on my own. That was always the vibe I got, which is why they don't really play a major part in Coda. They're very much like the classic reward for the hero jubal that we see as like, this the prized possession that you will win at the end of your trial. Quest completed. Here's your gold. Here's your wife. Here's your friend who's still not dead. Like, it's all good. We're ready for more
And
adventures.
a new
like,
card.
basically.
On what is one, Johnny?
Wait, you guys do know that Halalo here is Vec, right?
Dun dun dun.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Vivek is. I'm gonna play on some alchemical imagery here. I'm not making any comments about stuff in the real world, but because these terms can be offensive to people in the real world. But in a alchemical sense, Vivek is to be the magical hermaphrodite, which is which is both male and female, but the union of opposites, right? That's the plan, right? Vivek is supposed to be the resolution of duality into something new. That's the plan, and that's not what happens. And that Numidium is made in the image of Vivek means that Numidium is also an attempt to resolve duality. More on that some other time. And in Coda, what you see is that Vivek has divided herself into the female, possibly feminine, Vivek, who becomes the bride, and the male, possibly masculine, Halalu her, that is murdered by her husband. Or tries to kill her husband.
I had never picked up on that.
And is the division of the two halves of Vivek necessary for a more complete synthesis?
Well, is that why the Morg Tong shows up?
Yeah, and so this is the thing, is that Halalu here, who I would argue is Vec, or the mortal Vec, or memory of the mortal Vec, however you want to put it, is Jubal's guide, right? So that's a part of the whole of Vivek guiding Jubal, which makes sense, right? But then, but then the female part's like, you have to kill a Numidium. Wait, what? And there's
Good
there's
luck.
Good luck.
It
And
implies the existence of more than one Numidium.
it does, which I love. Of course there are, because there's multiple timelines. But moving on from that, yeah. And so then you have the mortal Vec, masculine, male, however you want to divide this up, that aspect of Vivek that's been peeled off tries to kill Jubal, perhaps for whatever reason, to protect the female, feminine aspect, whatever you want to try to play in there.
To
What-
try.
And that has to be killed.
Michael, what is marriage in the 36 Lessons?
Oh boy.
Also,
You're gonna have to help me out, Chris.
Hold on.
well, while he's finding it, I'm not sure I entirely agree with that, because I always kind of interpreted Halu here as a character in one of two ways. He's either like an attempted thief trying to steal
Sure.
not Numidium, but Vivek's affections,
Sure.
or he's the king of that world. Halu got all the money and wealth and power. He's the king, and that's why Jubal is the rebel, right? Like, that's kind of
Could be.
the vibe I was getting.
Yeah, I definitely
personally.
see some enantiomorphic stuff going on there.
There's definitely some
Yeah.
and the attempted killing could also just be another trial on the part of Vivek. More of the golden path, maybe.
It's okay. So Sermon 11. Embrace the art of the people and marry it, and by that I mean secretly have it murdered. So,
Like that song
again,
"Death of a Bachelor" by Panic at the Disco.
well, again, it's Vivek. So sex and murder are the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Marriage for Vivek is transformation. It's an enantiomorph. You take the husband and wife and you destroy them, and in their place is created a family. In the eyes of God, they're the same person now.
House of Weed.
A holy union.
Yes. And so a marriage requires a murder, or is a murder, if you like. And so the reason why Hlalu here, one of the many reasons why Hlalu here attempts to murder Jubal and Sul, or why Vivek, that aspect of Vivek attempts to murder Jubal, is because metaphor is reality. It's the same reason why Jubal attains Chim by cutting off his hands. By literally doing what's in the 36 Lessons of Vivek.
Yeah, come to God unarmored and wreathed in terror. But that just makes you realize, by killing Hlalu here, if Hlalu here is representative of like many of the male aspects of Vivek, and like the power and the divinity and like the leadership aspect, in a way, his death represents ego death, which is absolutely crucial to godhood.
Yeah. It's
all the toxic parts of Vivek.
It's a little bit disappointing to me that Hlalu here doesn't succeed in killing Vivek in the same way that, say, Agent Smith succeeds in killing Neo in the first Matrix movie.
Right.
It would have been nice if Jubal ends up getting killed or something, but Jubal's descent into the darkness, into the unknown, is the sequence where he attains Chim. That's when the hero descends into hell and comes back with knowledge.
Isn't that where he's also pointed out to be the Nerevarine too?
Yeah, and also the only last living descendant of Alandro Sul, and it's just the character's
More
just a whole
connections
bunch of
to Vishnu.
Yeah, it's a whole bunch of little dangling threads that all get tied together into one knot to create one uber hero. In addition to that, being a salt miner means that means a whole bunch of fucking stuff. In a way, Jubal Lansul's already performed the act of the hero by getting rid of by creating a system by which the Dunmer can defend themselves from the worms on Masser by being a salt merchant.
How well does Coda mesh with Campbell's monomyth?
I'm sorry?
So that the hero's journey. I wonder how much Coda aligns with the hero's journey.
Oh,
I would say pretty well.
It aligns well in places, but also Kirkbride has, I wouldn't say a dim view, but a not very complimentary view of Campbell's myth structure because he thinks it's sort of simplistic.
Yeah.
Which I mean it is, and the whole point of Campbell's structure was just to point out recurring themes in cultural storytelling.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just a human way of telling stories here. You know, this is the usual progression.
Yeah. And
This raises interesting questions because then if you apply Campbell, Vivek is the Spider Woman.
Yeah.
Black Hands Mafala.
Yeah.
Whose job it is to
which is
screw
great.
up the hero. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. No.
And I honestly, I kind of like the idea of Vivek's role in the creation of the Amaranth as being kind of a foil. You know, somebody who's throwing stuff in the way of the hero because the Vivek is basically it would have been like Vivek was basically saying, well, you can get this, but you're gonna have to prove it. You know, you're gonna have to earn it, right?
Or it could be in the same vein of thought as dropping Bardal. You need to go through some struggles to grow.
Yeah.
So that we together can make this journey.
Yeah.
You've got to want it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got to know that you can earn it. Yeah. It's, you know, Vivek's that really annoying NPC who like stops you in the middle of the quest to get the MacGuffin and is like, wait, I'll tell you where you can get the MacGuffin, but I don't want to send you to your doom. So first you're going to have to go and do some bullshit to prove to me that you're a hero.
Hero, your health is low. Do you have any potions or food?
I desire your strongest potions. No, but it's just sort of, you know, I mean, in that particular, in that like tongue-in-cheek way, it's just padding for, you know, to extend out the main story quest. But it's, I mean, for Vivek, like the idea of Vivek kind of hits that trickster god note, you know, that Loki kind of like, you know, I'm here to be a pain in your ass, but at the end of the day, you're going to benefit from it. And then the idea of the you know, of like you said, of the Spider Woman, of the you know, of the trickster, of the foil, being eventually the entity that provides the, you know, the big secret to enlightenment, or whatever you want to call it, is, yeah, that's very mythological. Yeah. It works out.
On that note, I realize we're coming up on like an hour and a half of this. Is there
do we have any more we want to cover
up on, or do we want to like still save sort of the last like motivations or other stuff for further character evaluation for a third Vivek stream?
I'm all for a third stream, but if you guys want to list off anything in the Selectives Lorecast channel that we haven't hit on, I'd like to hear about it.
What do you want to see about Vivek?
Yeah, I'm talking to you guys, but also chat. If there's anything that we haven't covered, I'd really like to hear about it. I kind of feel like we've basically hit the big notes. I don't have a problem with doing another cast where we're just grinding out the tiny details. I mean, mostly because I like the idea of doing Vivek in 3 casts. It's metaphysically appropriate, but also because we need third stream for meta reasons. That's what I'm saying, Doc. Thank you. So I like the idea of going over like the really granular stuff, but I want to make sure that there aren't any big tickets that we haven't punched. And I think we've hit them all. I mean, we tickled Coda a little bit. Do we need to spend a little bit more time on that, or?
I mean, maybe we could focus on like the sermons and Coda specifically.
Oh, I would love to go through the sermons. Yeah.
So we can
the whole tribunal quest line where we talk where we go through Vivek's trials.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. That's
and
a
the
good
other
idea.
stuff, like,
Right, because that talks on why we're doing this anyway, which is because of the updated ESO thing. So we're talking about Vivek and stuff and what motivates them, and now we can get to the actual meat of
ESO
the matter
content.
in like the sermons and the trials in ESO. So I think that's how we can do stuff for the third cast.
Yeah,
There's a lot to work with there. So
and we could talk about the trial of Vivek too as book off.
That's a good. That's
Oh,
yeah,
God,
yeah. That's a
please
good
no.
point, Baka.
That's-
Yeah. Mhm.
Please, God,
that's
no.
worth at least. I know, Michael, you don't like that one.
Really hate it.
a lot of people don't like it, and like
Yeah,
with very
for
understandable
obvious and
reasons.
very valid reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and the
But
and
it's
the
still
Vivek
worth.
parts of the Tribunal Temple quest line,
Do what?
Mm,
the Vivek parts, the Tribunal Temple quest line, and what that.
No, I haven't done
Yeah.
that in so long. I don't even remember.
ESO
it.
content. Okay.
You got stuff. Chris,
I've got
please
an
don't die.
alt in ESO. I'll try and get him through the Morrowind content.
Oh, I've.
Well,
I've done-
if
I've
Chris
done the
dies,
Morrowind
we just
content so
resolve
many
the
times.
11.
Mm. I'm
And
sorry.
I have a heretical interpretation of the sermons, but we'll see.
Oh, if you want to, well, look, dude, if we could spend a whole episode on the sermons, I'll be a happy boy. So yeah.
There
Um,
we go. We
Let's
know what
like
we're doing
Chris
next.
and Michael in a room and see
I
who
think-
comes out.
Pyropath's excellent point. We haven't talked about Sermon 37.
Oh my
No,
God,
yeah.
yes.
So,
we can
yeah,
do that
Necessary.
Mhm.
next time.
Yep, all the
Absolutely,
more
yeah.
reason to touch on the sermons and stuff
I
next
mean-
time. There we go.
I mean, if we can do like an abridged New Whirling School kind of thing. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah. With Chris, you're here, obviously.
I've only done it once, and that was during my Morrowind playthrough. So I have no problem doing it again. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's good discussion.
Although, also, again, depending on next time this happens, like we may have to reschedule, or it may not work out, and I'm not
Right.
part of it because chat.
We'll
I got
work
a
with you,
full-time
dude.
position at my work. I'm going from part-time to full-time, so we'll see how much that impacts things.
Mhm.
But hopefully I'll still be here because already I've realized I'm over like 50% of the episodes now. It feels very weird.
Oh.
Welcome to the team.
Didn't intend to
it's
be
like,
here
and
that
I've been
long,
doing
did you?
this for years, and I'm like, I first did this in like 2017.
I'm afraid of commitment, you guys. I'm gonna have to get out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well. Yeah. Let's Felix let's talk about your schedule off the stream, and in the meantime, thanks to everybody who subbed. In total, Valis the Machine Elf, Skyu TV, and Pyropaths. Thank you for your tier 1s. I love you very much.
And thank you everyone
Um,
for being here. We love getting
Yes.
questions
Yes.
and like references from chat.
Yeah, and yeah, thanks very much for everybody for showing up. Join the Discord. It's there's a link in the channel description. Send us all questions that you have to selectiveslorecast@gmail.com. We really want to get them, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Emails?
Thank you very much.
Emails?
Wave bye bye.
No.
Take
Okay.
care,
Bye,
friends. Thank
everybody.
you.
Yeah, no,
Bye.
no emails.